chosen one, you didn't lose people because you became difficult. You didn't lose them because you became cold, arrogant, or unreachable. You lost them because you grew, and growth exposes everything that comfort was hiding. This message is not here to soothe your emotions first. It's here to realign your understanding. Because the moment you started evolving, something ancient was activated: separation. Not rejection, separation. And there is a difference that changes how you carry the loss. When you were smaller, quieter, more uncertain, you were easier to access. Your presence didn't challenge anyone. Your dreams didn't confront their fears. Your obedience didn't expose their disobedience. But the moment you chose growth, real growth, the kind that costs you sleep, comfort, approval, and old versions of yourself, you stopped being familiar. And familiarity is the currency many people survive on. When you outgrow familiarity, some people can no longer afford you emotionally. Understand this clearly. Some people were never assigned to your future. They were assigned to your process. And once the process was complete, their access expired. That doesn't make them evil, it makes them seasonal. But chosen ones struggle here because you don't grow casually. When you grow, it's internal, spiritual, psychological, and behavioral. You don't just change habits, you change frequency. And when frequency shifts, alignment breaks. You noticed it slowly at first. Conversations felt shallow, laughter felt forced. Your silence became louder than your words. You started seeing patterns instead of excuses. You started choosing peace over proving yourself. And people who once celebrated your availability started resenting your boundaries. Not because boundaries are wrong, but because boundaries remove entitlement. And entitlement is what many relationships were built on. Here is a truth most won't say out loud. Some people benefited from the version of you that didn't know their worth. They benefited from your overgiving, your self-doubt, your need to be accepted, your willingness to stay quiet to keep the peace. When you grew, that supply stopped. And when the benefit ends, so does the attachment. That's not betrayal. That's revelation. You didn't imagine the shift. Heaven orchestrated it. Growth triggers divine discomfort in relationships that cannot go where you're going. God will not allow certain people to follow you into rooms they would sabotage. So instead of removing them violently, He lets your growth do the work. Your elevation becomes the filter. Your obedience becomes the dividing line. Your healing becomes the exposure. That's why the distance hurt more than the argument that never happened. There was no explosion, no clear ending. Just silence, just fading, just an unspoken understanding that something had changed and could not be undone. And that silence tested you. Because chosen ones don't fear loneliness, they fear misunderstanding. But sometimes misunderstanding is protection in disguise. You had to lose the audience that clapped for the old version of you because they would have booed the new one. They knew how to access your past, but not how to honor your future. And every time you tried to bring your evolving self into old spaces, you felt resistance, subtle jabs, passive jokes, energy shifts, minimization of your progress. Not because you were wrong, but because your growth reminded them of what they avoided. This is where many chosen ones shrink themselves again. They apologize for changing. They dim their clarity. They resurrect old habits to keep old connections. But that's where destiny gets delayed. Because growth that is negotiated is no longer growth, it's compromise. And compromise always costs more than separation. You must understand people who truly belong with you will adjust, not accuse. They will ask questions, not assume superiority. They will celebrate your discipline, not mock it. If your growth made them uncomfortable, it's because it required them to confront themselves, and not everyone is willing to do that, especially when avoidance has kept them comfortable for years. Your growth forced honesty into rooms built on convenience. It disrupted dynamics that thrived on you being predictable. It exposed attachments that were rooted in nostalgia, not alignment. And nostalgia is dangerous because it makes people romanticize versions of you that no longer exist. They loved who you were when you needed them, but they don't know how to love who you are now that you stand on your own. Chosen ones often grieve people who are still alive, not because those people disappeared physically, but because the connection died spiritually. And that grief is confusing because there was no funeral, no closure, no final conversation, just a quiet ending. But heaven sees that ending as obedience. You weren't meant to drag everyone into your next season. You were meant to arrive lighter. Some people left because your growth removed their influence. Others left because it removed their control. Others left because it removed their access. But none of them left because you were wrong for growing. That lie is what keeps you second, guessing yourself at night. The truth is, growth always costs relationships that were rooted in stagnation, always. Look closely and you'll see it. The ones who left often stopped growing long before you did. They settled into comfort and called it peace. They accepted cycles and called them stability. And when you refused to stay the same, your movement threatened their stillness. So instead of growing with you, they distanced themselves from you. This is where God steps in quietly. He doesn't explain everything immediately because explanation would keep you emotionally tied. Instead, He allows the separation to mature you, to teach you discernment, to show you that not everyone who walks with you is meant to walk ahead with you. Some are only there to teach you who you are not anymore. You didn't become lonely because people left. You became selective because you woke up, and awakening is isolating before it's fulfilling. That's the cost no one warns you about. When your standards rise, your circle shrinks. When your vision sharpens, distractions fall away. When your identity solidifies, access becomes restricted. This is not loss, this is alignment. There will be moments you miss them, not because they were right for you, but because they were familiar. And familiarity can feel like safety even when it wasn't healthy. But every time you consider going back, something in you resists. That's growth protecting itself. That's your spirit refusing to fit into spaces it outgrew. Chosen one, you didn't lose people when you grew. You shed weight. You released resistance. You obeyed an internal call that demanded more from you than staying comfortable ever could. And the people who couldn't follow weren't punished, they were spared. Because if they had stayed, they would have resented the version of you that refused to shrink again. What's coming requires clarity, not crowd approval. Strength, not familiarity. Obedience, not consensus. And that's why your path feels quieter now, not emptier, clearer. You're not alone, you're being prepared. And one day, you'll look back and realize that the people you thought you lost were never taken from you. They were released so you could finally become who you were always called to be. Now hear this carefully, because section 2 is not explanation, it is alignment. This is where the meaning of the loss becomes clear, and where your posture must shift if you are going to carry what's coming next. There is a reason your life feels quieter right now. It is not because momentum stopped, it is because noise was removed. God does not speak over chaos when He is preparing someone for precision. Before expansion comes isolation. Before multiplication comes subtraction. And before public elevation comes private separation. You are not being hidden, you are being positioned. The people who exited did not delay you. They accelerated you. They created space for discernment, for hearing clearly, for strengthening your inner authority. When they were present, you constantly adjusted your tone, explained your growth, softened your truth, and justified your decisions. Now you no longer have to dilute yourself to be understood. Heaven removed the audience so you could finally listen. This is the stage where many chosen ones make a critical mistake. They try to replace what was removed too quickly. They rush to fill the silence with new connections, distractions, or noise because stillness feels unfamiliar. But this season requires restraint. What left was not meant to be immediately replaced. It was meant to be processed. Rushed connections recreate old cycles. Healed solitude creates new capacity. God is rebuilding your inner structure. Your confidence is being rerouted, not in affirmation from others, but in alignment with truth. That's why your validation sources are changing. Compliments don't move you like they used to. Criticism doesn't shake you the same way. You are becoming internally governed, and internally governed people cannot be controlled by external pressure. Pay attention to what no longer tempts you, the conversations you no longer entertain, the environments that drain you faster than before. That is not pride, that is clarity. You are no longer trying to prove your worth to rooms that benefit from your doubt. You are conserving energy for assignments that require focus and maturity. This is also why old people may try to return when they sense the shift. Not because they changed, but because they feel the absence of your presence. When growth produces fruit, those who walked away sometimes circle back hoping for access without transformation. But this season demands discernment. Familiarity is not proof of alignment. History is not a qualification. You must be willing to let people meet you where you are now, not where they last remember you. If they cannot respect your boundaries, honor your pace, or acknowledge your growth, they are not being rejected, they are being redirected. Your responsibility is not to make others comfortable. Your responsibility is to remain obedient. The reason this message is landing so deeply is because something in you already knew this. You felt the release before you understood it. You sensed the shift before you could explain it. That is because this separation was spiritual before it was social. Heaven moved first. The earth followed. What is coming into your life will not require you to beg for understanding, over-explain your intentions, or shrink your standards. The next connections will recognize you by alignment, not access, by peace, not convenience, by growth, not history. They will meet you whole, not hungry. This is not the season to look back with regret. It is the season to look forward with responsibility. You are now accountable for what you know, for how you move, and for who you allow close. Growth has qualified you for more, but more requires discernment. So stand firm in the quiet. Don't interpret the silence as abandonment. It is confirmation. God is close. Direction is near. And what was removed will soon make sense when what replaces it arrives in alignment, not conflict. You didn't lose people when you grew. You gained vision. You gained authority. You gained peace. And from this place, your life will no longer be crowded. It will be intentional.